Isaac, my friend. This is gonna be like an easy conversation. I want to talk about like life in general. Obviously, we're gonna start talking about your upbringing and like musical influences and if family had any influences on your career choices, on your music choices, progressing through how you formed your first bands and end up like joining Epica firmly and officially back in 2009, and then just like talk about literally like anything that comes to mind. It's just a free flow conversation. I'll ask you about if you have like morning routines. Like I know that you have a beautiful family, and how can you coordinate, having a beautiful family, going on the road, coming back, having kids. It's something that I, for example, don't have any experience on, but
Right.
you know, I would love to maybe one day have the chance to have all that, finding the right person. And so,
I'll tell you not to. No, sounds good to me, man.
fantastic. So let me just double check if I am with everything fine here. If my screen is actually doing what it has to do, then we'll just crack on. So let me just check that screen. Okay, boom, boom. Fantastic. Isaac, my friend, good to see you. Welcome to the roller coaster.
Thanks, Carl. Can't wait.
I'm glad to have the chance to talk to you. I mean, we obviously bumped into each other during the summer at I think it was Download here in the UK,
Yeah.
and but you guys are super busy, and it's extremely exciting to obviously have a lengthy career and keep progressing and making things happen and exciting. So for me, it's an extreme pleasure to have you here today and to talk career and music as well, but other things that maybe people don't particularly focus much elsewhere. So welcome and
Yeah.
thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me.
Um, well, I'd like to start asking you where were you born and how was your upbringing? What was happening on Isaac's childhood, and if you have any siblings, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it all happened 41 years ago in Belgium, Yper, Belgium. It's a small town close to France in Belgium. And I was born and raised there. And I was a second child out of, eventually many siblings. My parents got divorced at some point, so my dad remarried and all of that. Got half brothers and stepsisters and everything that has the word step in it. I have it or had it multiple times. So it was quite a big family, or it still is. And that was, I guess, good. We all had our. I mean, if I dive into the music thing right away, my mom actually is a trained pianist, so she didn't really have a career in music, but she just graduated at the conservatory for piano, and she started doing something with music, but then figured out that like teaching and all of that was not really for her, so she chose a different path, but she's still actively listening to music, not playing that much, but she was always like, there was always music in the house. Same with my dad. He never really touched an instrument, but he has a very good ear for music. He always, I mean, his stuff was more like Neil Young, the Beatles, what else? Dire Straits, stuff like that. Whereas my mom was more for like Elton John and all the piano guys, right? And classical music. Um, and yeah, having a lot of siblings, different ages, different personalities, so they obviously had different choices in music, which was, I hated it back then, but eventually I guess it influenced me in some ways. My older brother was more into, well, he could listen to either Pink Floyd or like dance music, techno music, stuff like that. So it was already a quite big range of musical influences. Then my younger brother, he was more into underground hip hop, maybe hardcore as well, like the metal hardcore and Biohazard, stuff like that. But all underground, not very, like not the big acts. And then my stepsister was more into like the top 40 stuff that was on radio and girly stuff, which I hated. So, and you know, I had also half brothers, which were a lot younger than me, so they listened to a whole different thing. And so that was kind of the background of my family musically. And then we had to do art classes, we had to do sports, so I went to play soccer, and we had to do music academy. It was not an option, right? So we just got enrolled, and that was it. And I didn't really like it at first, so I you know, you first learn the rhythm, reading the notes, stuff like that, the boring shit. And then eventually you have to pick an instrument after 1 year. And I wanted to be a drummer, but my dad decided he didn't want to have a drum kit in the house. So he said, no way, just pick something else. So first I thought I'll get back to him and I'll choose trumpet or violin, because it's like really hard to play, and trumpet is, I'll just, you know, blow the trumpet in his ear all the time. So he maybe changes his mind. And the third option was guitar, because my older brother was already playing piano and I didn't really want to do that. And a lot of my peers were enrolling for guitar classes. So eventually, out of the three options, I got assigned to do classical guitar. I was 7 years old back then.
Wow.
Yeah, 7. And that's what I did. But honestly, I hated every second of it. I didn't want to go to music academy. I didn't want to play guitar. So I just did even not what I had to do, you know, just like the minimum of the minimum, just to pass. And obviously, I know that now because I've been a teacher for a while. Like, the best way to learn things is during the class. So I was just playing during class, and during the week I didn't do shit at home. But still it worked. And I still didn't like it after years and years of being enrolled by my parents year after year. I preferred, you know, soccer, and the art classes were cool, but music was like, you know, whatever. I'll do it because I have to. But and that changed when I was around, I think it was around 14, something like that. So I also have to mention that by the time I was 11, doing my communion, my stepmom, who was a huge Dire Straits fan, you know, Mark Knopfler, great guitar player, and I also liked that band, you know, and the player, and she always said, like, you have to learn how to play like him, you know. So every now and then in my room, I tried to find some way to play what he did, but I couldn't, you know. You went to music academy, so you got the sheet music and you played exactly. Never heard of ear training or anything like that. So when I was 11, I did my communion, and she actually gave me an electric guitar because she thought, you know, maybe that's more for him, and, you know, maybe it's more relatable because I was starting to listen to bands, and no one played classical guitar, you know. They all played electric. But then it was kind of sitting there because I didn't know what to do with it. You were supposed to play with a guitar pick. The neck was a lot thinner than the classical guitar, you know. Long story short, I didn't do shit with it. And then it wasn't until my guitar teacher, when I was around 14, he told me, like, well, Isaac, you're not doing anything for this class, but still great. So let's make a deal. And I think it was around maybe February, something like that. And so every end of one certain year would be June. So he said, let's make a deal. Up until your exam in June, you'll just practice. And what can go wrong? You know, either you'll still hate it, or maybe you become really good at it, and maybe you can do something with it eventually. And I think just that challenge, you know, I'm an all or nothing guy, you know, still, and I love challenges. So just that little sentence for me was enough to start practicing like a maniac. So that's what I did, and by June I got like really good grades, and I kind of left everyone behind, you know, like playing really difficult pieces already. And I guess that was the point where I also put enough work into the practice and the playing that it became fun. Because before that, it was just going there once a week, looking at the sheet. Oh, what was I supposed to do? Okay, let's play it, you know. But now I knew pieces by heart, or I could fool around with dynamics, stuff like that, because I just knew what I was doing more and more. And that was kind of the beginning. He was also the same teacher who, at one point, there was a short break during the year, and he came up with this electric guitar class. He didn't give the lessons himself, but he invited some guy who's really good in electric guitar, and he would teach us some songs. So I learned some Nirvana, some, I think, Offspring, bands that were popular back then, and obviously more fun than the stuff that we were playing with classical guitar, you know. So, and I guess that was where I already had the electric guitar. I could brag to other peers, like, hey, I can play Smells Like Teen Spirit or whatever, you know. And that was the beginning of it. I was back then 15 maybe, and that's when I started my first band with a couple of friends, and we took it from there.
Very cool. I mean, that's quite impressive. I didn't know that you had started taking lessons by the age of 7. That's quite something. And everything that you've mentioned from home, the influences, the music that your dad was listening to, that your mom was listening to, that your siblings were involved. I mean, you got exposed to so much good stuff. Because I mean, I personally am a fan of the vast majority of the names that you have mentioned. You know,
Yeah.
even the poppy bands and the girly bands and things like that from the 90s. I'm a big fan. You know, and even dance music from the 80s and. Not my forte, but you know, I have appreciation for that. But obviously,
Yeah.
all the bands from the 60s and the 70s, and then rock and roll, for like, you know, black music 40s and 50s merging with everything, and then eventually having the Beatles, right, who basically revolutionized everything from being like the very first pop group to write their own music, and like straight away the first one writing their own music, they were writing like amazing
Yeah.
songs. It's not that, you know, we got prepared for something, you know, but no,
They're
the first
full of
ones
that.
the first ones to do everything, you know, stadium band, pop, everything. And still to this day, I mean, for me it's like the Beatles are like on my top list of the acts that I most love listening to. And yeah, and what basically did you remember when you got like in touch with metal, when you listened, when you had like when you had some heavy bands coming into play, and then everything that you were studying on the instrument maybe you know, brought you into playing heavy riffs, as you mentioned, from Smells Like Teen Spirit, but perhaps getting into something a little bit heavier, and maybe even getting the interest on, you know, soloing and getting into something that would basically become your life later on.
Well, I guess it all started around 12-ish. That's when, again, with the communion, I got my electric guitar, but I also did a performance with some nephews. We did some sort of playback thing, sort of show for the family, right? So we built our own guitars just out of wood and some drums, and we played some Guns N' Roses. And I also remember, because I was already, I don't know how I picked up on them or when exactly, but I know also for that same communion I got, I think it might have been Spaghetti Incident or Use Your Illusion. I'm not sure. One of those. And I got it as a gift, which was to me like the holy grail, some music that my parents or anyone in the family didn't listen to but me. And so that's where it all started. And then I got some, like if I had a little money, I went to remember those days when you had CD shops.
Of course I do.
You could go in and they had CDs. So that's what I did whenever I had some money. And usually my choice would be go to the metal or hard rock section and then scroll through some, just by looking at the album artwork. If it spoke to me, I'd buy it, without even listening to it. Mm-hmm. So I guess the second album ever that I owned was Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation.
Wow, that's heavy.
Which is like death metal as brutal as it gets, I guess. Yeah. So I went home and it just looked really scary and really like something that no one else would listen to. And when I heard it, it was like, well, now I understand why not a lot of people listen to this, because I thought in the beginning it was horrible. It took me years to appreciate what they're doing. So I went to school, took the album, and sold it to one of my friends, and he loved it. But eventually, I got to love my death metal, of course. But that's kind of how it started. You just go to a CD store, you pick up some albums, and soon I got into Dream Theater. I had a huge progressive metal phase where I would buy old albums that looked progressive because they had a very distinctive look, usually.
Do you still have your CD collection from those days?
Yeah, I still have them in the attic. So it's something that I always think like, I should go up to the attic and scroll through them, and because now I can stack all the CDs, I can kind of import them in my car. But I never do it. I still go back to the same albums over and over again. But there's some really interesting and underground stuff there.
Did you used to buy only CDs, or did you buy vinyl and cassettes and things like that as well?
No, usually CDs. I had a CD player. My dad had an LP player, but it was like too much hassle to. Then I had to wait until he was gone to use his pickup. Mm-hmm. So it's mainly CDs. I do have some LPs, but that's not something I don't have a real LP collection.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose that nowadays, for you, when you listen to music, you just you listen via DSPs, basically Spotify, Apple Music, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
exactly. I'm a huge fan of radio. So I usually just listen to whatever's on the radio, except for the moments when I'm in my car. Then I go back to my classic albums, which are, as I mentioned, stacked there. And I just get inspired by not any radio station, I would say, but the one I listen to, it's a Belgian radio station called Joe FM, and it has a good mixture of really of a lot of the older stuff and then some newer stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's not the kind of some of these channels are only doing like modern stuff, or it's not like that. It's a good mixture, and I like that. Every now and then they also do like an 80s list or a 90s, whatever, Mm-hmm. And so I get a lot of different genres during the day. and that's what I like.
When it comes to like you mentioned it, inspiration, you use the word inspiration. When it comes to like trying to get inspired or sitting down to write music, do you follow any particular process? How do you approach songwriting? Is it something that you try to think of a theme, or you try to put some time on the day that you're gonna sit down quietly and let inspiration come, or see what comes out of where you played? How do you approach like songwriting?
It's very hard to explain because it can be anything, honestly. It's so weird. Sometimes you're just, as I mentioned, you're listening to the radio, you hear something like, oh, and I write it down, in my notes on my phone. I'd write down uh, this song, that artist, bridge. And then I have to go back on Spotify or whatever to find it, and maybe I even forgot that it was an inspiration or what I was meaning. Maybe it's the groove, maybe it's the melody, whatever. But it's like something that pops in my mind, like, oh, I can make this metal. It's some sort of 80s dance, whatever thing, or other times it's like you say, I'm here in my home studio, so I have like all my guitars, my gear. I have everything here. I can just switch everything on and grab my guitar, start noodling around, or maybe I have a thought, or I want to write a riff. Maybe I have a melody that popped in. Maybe, one of the songs for Epica that is on, that I wrote and that's played on every show, is a melody that popped into my mind when I was walking the dog just down the road here. And I live close by a train rail track. And the train was passing by. It was so noisy, but still that melody popped in my mind at that time. So I ran back halfway the route, and I ran back to record it here in my home studio. And that became eventually that song, and a quite good one, let's say. And so it's very random. Then other days I just pick up the guitar and I write a song in half a day, because it's a riff song maybe. And then I've had songs that I wrote over the course of 7 years, that it takes 7 years, not constantly working on it, but just like working on it, putting on the shelf, coming back to it, knowing that, oh, I need to change this or that. And then you can't figure it out, and then it takes years and years and years to develop. Maybe you wrote another song in the meantime and you have a leftover, and you're like, hey, but wait a minute, if I use that idea and I come back to this song that is still on the shelf, maybe there's going to be a connection there. And sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. Or you work on a song a whole day, you think you have the holy grail now. Finally, the monster hit. And then the next day you listen back to it, you're like, oh, shit, forget about it. So it's very hard to explain where inspiration comes from. It's like, or someone tells you a story, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, like this is interesting. So it's not always musically. It could be a theme or like whatever. It's a weird thing.
Just for everyone here to go and check it out, whoever is not familiar with Epica music, what song was the one that you ran back from the street that you had the melody that you guys play currently?
That was Beyond the Matrix.
Beyond the Matrix. There you go.
The Matrix. So the main melody, which is translated eventually into a choir part, that part, which is also the intro, and it comes back on every chorus. That's the part. And then the rest of the song, I already kind of had, like, I had some pieces here and there, but it didn't make sense, It was, without that idea, was one of these things that would stay on the shelf, And suddenly it clicks, and it usually does when do something that has nothing to do with composing or being creative or whatever. It's just walking the dog.
And how do you, for example, when does it become like, I guess it's two questions in one, but do you tend to be, because obviously in general artists and musicians, they tend to always seeking the perfect riff, the perfect rhythm, the perfect melody, trying to come up every album you write, every song you come up, every idea. It's always that urge to, this is gonna be, like you said, the monster hit. This is the one. You know, how do you manage your own expectations in regards to that when you're coming up with ideas and understanding that, okay, this is good, this might lead somewhere, or maybe this is leading somewhere and you've been working on this particular idea for a while and now it's time to actually get a demo, do a pre-production, and eventually, you know, produce to actually enter an album. How do you manage your personal expectation, and how do you observe yourself during the process to not overthink too much, of trying to kind of like perfect too much the song, or perfect too much the particular riff, and eventually maybe losing it, or just maybe shelving it?
Yeah. Well, I think the key word here is honesty, and again, it's hard to explain, but whenever I have something that I have a little doubt about, you know, a little piece of the song that I'm not sure if it's totally right yet, and I send over the demo to the band, it's the first thing that comes to the plate. Like, yeah, good song, but maybe this part needs some more work. So, and it's been like that always. And it's been like that whenever bands reach out to me, or people who have a band and they need some advice, or can you listen to this demo, or can you help us out? And every now and then I do. And every time I tell them, you know, it's, but try this, or maybe this part is not really fitting or whatever. Like 99% of the times, they're like, yeah, we know. And it is like that with me as well. So whenever you, it's a feeling, you know. It's like being honest with yourself. If you know that it's not right yet, then it's not right yet. And it's as simple as that. But sometimes it's frustrating if you have to be honest like that, because when are you satisfied, right? So, but whenever the song starts speaking for itself, I would say, which is a very, like, you know, it takes these kind of weird expressions to explain what I mean, you know, like when it becomes the song, so to speak, that's where you can let go and like, okay, now it's good. The same with that melody that popped in my mind. It didn't matter if it was a choir or a violin or a guitar or whatever, it was the melody that started speaking. And if it would be, you know, it you know, every now and then you have hits which have la 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 or blah blah blah, or which there's not even lyrics. There's an instrument playing something. So it's not necessarily about the message in that case. It's just the melody. And then other times it's the message. Obviously, it's like it doesn't matter what the chords are. It's like this is a very strong message. Imagine, for example, you know. Or knocking on heaven's door, for that matter. It doesn't really matter what the music would do. Of course, we all know it in that version, but bottom line is that the message is stronger. So it also depends on that. But then once you have that melody, and if it's a good melody, which stands on its own, and you know, oh, it's fine, then at least you already have that. And then whatever comes before or after, you decide, do I want to continue with that, or do I want to break from that? I have a strong melody. What comes before? What comes after? Maybe you want to start with a strong melody, so it pops into everyone's head already. And then if you've done that, you need to cool down, and especially if it's a melody with let's say vocals. After that, you want the people to, or yourself for that matter, to have a little break and have some instrumental thing. So that's the flow of how you write it. You think of what's the next step to take, and usually it's like in life. What's the next step you're gonna take? You have multiple options, but whatever decision you make, you'll end up somewhere. If it's a good place or a bad place, you'll find out. You can always turn back and take another exit, but well, not always, but usually. And it's kind of the same with writing. It's not rocket science. It's trial and error. And if it works, it's sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's gonna work all fine, like decision after decision, and that's gonna give you a song in one day.
And it's still somehow a teamwork as well, right? Because you mentioned that you will send the idea to the band, and more often than not, it has always been very similar. The fact that they will say, "Oh, maybe change this or maybe add that." So you've learned during this process to obviously trust the people that you work with to a level where you know what they're saying. There is something to it. And it's not a one-man's job or a two-sided people kind of relationship. Because writing music, writing lyrics, and expressing yourself via music can be quite, when people, it might be something they really enjoy, but it could be something that some other people doesn't really relate to. And this relationship, sometimes there's a lot of emotion involved in music, right? So it's like, oh, but I really like this. I mean, what's wrong with it? And so it takes you into it takes a lot to be able to be vulnerable, I suppose, as well, to accept that it might be something that you're really interested in. And that's when sometimes obviously different ideas and different visions for musicality, for development of different sounds and different even routes to take the music of a group or of an artist sometimes coming into discussion, right? Because people change. When you're 20, you really like, there's things that stick on you, but like the older you get, I mean, the more mature you get, we always hope for that for everyone, anyway. and we change. So like musical tastes, they will change. Something that you used to listen when you're 20 might not be the case that you might be blasting out nowadays, and that might influence the output of your creativity as well. I would imagine, right?
Right, but that's totally right. But I would also mention that if you write music, you shouldn't follow any trend. It's easy to do that. Oh, this band next door has a lot of success. What's their formula? What are they doing? And let's do that. That would be easy because it's sort of copy paste, right? In a certain way. And that's the thing you have to remind yourself of. Like, they do what they do best, and maybe they also rip it off from someone else. Who knows? But so I think in that way, just making the music, and it sounds very cliche, but we just make the music that we feel is good at that time. And some albums will be better than other albums, I suppose, for people out there, I guess. Or I'm sure, I've heard. But still, it's like in that particular phase of our lives, collectively as a band, that we make this kind of music, and not everyone is happy with the music that we made at that point in time. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. And then secondly, I would say that, we all change. We all, I became a dad. I have a lot more responsibilities as opposed to when I was 20, sure. So there's a lot of, I can't sit in my home studio for 16 days like I used to. And I wish I could, but it's not the case. So I need to, yeah, make use of my time in a different way, which is fine. But also, I want to point out that we're 6 individuals in this band, and you could say, well, everyone has a different opinion, and it's very frustrating. Sure, it's frustrating, you know, every now and then. It's like, well, I really love this, as you mentioned. Like, you really love something you wrote, and then someone says, nah, I would change it, you know, or the vocal melody, it should be different. And you've been singing this in your mind for a half a year already before you send it to the others, right? And you can already imagine like a crowd of people who are singing along, and you know the whole vision is there, right? And then someone tells you, nah. But it's frustrating. But it's also like that when I write something, I could easily think of, oh, but this is where, let's say, the drummer can do his magic, because I can program some drums, but not like a drummer. I can do like a hi-hat and a kick and a snare and maybe a drum fill, but I can't do his magic. He's been doing this for forever, you know, and I only program drums whenever I'm writing a song. So I make it very basic, but I know like, oh, this piece needs his input. Or let's say Mark, the other guitar player, when he writes, he tends to have like a million ideas in one song, way too much, and then we have to cut out the weeds, let's say, to end up with something like structured. But his forte is to come up with, if you have one idea, he can come up with like 20 other ideas that have something to do with it. Well, this is also something you can use, because I can't, you know. And so it's easy to only look at what's frustrating, but you also have to look at, okay, I started writing this song, but now it needs something that this or that person would add in like the blink of an eye. I could work on it for 2 years, or I give it to them and they're gonna fix it in one day. And so that's also the other side of that. You know, we have different opinions, but we also have our strong individual things that every single one of us is good at.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think
obviously you mentioned trust, and that obviously takes trust to do that. But so every now and then it also is like that, like, okay, this is the best I could do. I already sent it off. I'm not 100% sure if it's what it should be already, but without even mentioning that I need this person or that person's help, because they come up with it themselves, because you already doubted this little part, so you know that it's going to come up. And then you can, well, maybe we need a part like this, and hey, you're good at that. So
psychology of being in the band, exactly, which brings me to like not necessarily a question, but like your experience with how to maintain, like, which will spill to other areas of life, which we'll talk about later, like a relationship and marriage and family and all that. But like within a band, within the group of individuals, how is there anything in particular that you observed from your career, on your career? Is there anything or any sorts of behaviors or approaches that you take personally, that you end up seeing other people around you doing it as well, in order to maintain fluidity, maintain honesty, maintain 5 different people still focused and still thriving and still wanting to do what you're doing, which is write music, record albums, tour the world, and obviously face the difficulties that come with it, because from outsiders' perspective, it's always like, oh my God, these people, they're living the dream, they are traveling, they're doing big shows, they are making a lot of money, they are multimillionaires, this and that. But we know that there is a very good, there is a lot of truth in it, which is, yes, you're making a living out of something that you love, you're traveling with people that you like being around and all of that. But there's other sides of it that a lot of people don't see, which is being far away from the family and whatever things that might happen with each individual part of the group. But for you personally, Isaac, how have you navigated the ups and downs of a long-term career being in a band, in a band that basically travels the world continuously, playing shows and recording albums? How did you deal with it all during your life?
Well, it's not a very conscious thing, I would say. It's more like, sure, we have ups and downs for sure, but you always kind of keep in mind what the alternative could look like. Maybe that's a thing, and also just that it's not as bad as you think it is. You know, you can get caught up in something if you're together 24/7 with some people that are not necessarily your best friends. Let's face it. You know, Epica is not a band that, before starting the band, we were hanging out in a pub. You know, we're located in 4 different countries. We're people that randomly, you know, like kind of ended up in that band. So it's not necessarily my best friend out there that I asked to play bass in my band, let's say. So that's maybe it's sort of a colleague relationship, but obviously you share that much time together, so you get to know each other really well, and you know when to get away from someone or just when to talk to someone. Or yeah, I mean, I don't want to dramatize it. I would say compared to some other bands, and I think that the low points, we realize we need to sit together and we need to talk it out, you know. And usually you don't come to a certain conclusion right away, but at least you can get things out of your chest and it's out there, you know, instead of being in your mind and making it bigger than it actually is. And so I think that's a good trademark, let's say, or a good thing that we do every now and then. Even if it's not on a low, just knowing like who is, where the heads are at, you know, which direction we want to go. You know, some of us have a family, others don't. So that's a different thing, you know. Again, I can't sit here all day and work for the band. Again, I wish I could because I love it, but it's not the case. And yeah, and also I would say just try to use your strengths and know what someone else's strengths are, you know. I rather have Simone do all the interviews and look good doing it than me doing it and not really caring about it, because I prefer to, I don't know, run the numbers of a tour. And she doesn't like that. She's not interested in like bookkeeping or stuff like that, but I like it. So and I don't feel bad if she, what's that?
You were the tour manager of the band.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but hell no, I would never want to be a tour manager. No, but I do like, you know, you make music and all of that, but I do like let's say, the whole marketing idea, the whole how will you make more people eventually listen to your music or come out to your shows or buying your shirt, you know, the whole maybe psychology behind it or the whole number thing. I do like that. But I also understand that not everyone in the band likes that, you know, or drummer, he just wants to play drums and he does it pretty well. So we don't need a different drummer, and it's okay for him if he doesn't care about that. And again, you know, that could be sometimes frustrating if you have big decisions to make. But still, you know, you're gonna shoot them because they don't really feel any affection with numbers. Mm-hmm. It's like you have to realize that we're still a band making music, and we try our best. And from the moment you start thinking, oh, but we need to earn more money, and we need to have more fun. Like if it always needs to grow, and if that's your fixation, then trouble's gonna arrive. You know, it shouldn't be your initial goal. Of course, you want to play bigger shows, or you know, maybe earn a little more than the year before. Who doesn't? But it shouldn't be your starting point, let's say. And I think we all understand that. I think we're all at a point where, yeah, we make a living of something that we love doing. And so everything that, all the extras are nice extras. But if it doesn't happen, it's fine too, you know, let's say.
Of course.
We're already happy the way it is, and of course you want to expand, but it's not the main goal. It should never be the main goal. It was never the main goal when I picked up that electric guitar when some friends asked me to start a band. Even though I already looked up to Slash and Guns N' Roses and thought like, oh, how awesome would it be to be like him, you know? But it's just the creation of music, you know, stuff like that.
I love everything that you said, because being a musician or working in the music industry on any capacity, it's not something that people get into it thinking, oh, I'm gonna get rich, or I'm gonna make actually a very good living out of it. Most people get into it because of the passion and something that drives them internally, some sort of higher power or some inspiration, something that really touches them to make something out of something, you know, like out of an instrument or out of relationships or whatever it might be. But I relate entirely to everything that you've just said, because most people, whenever they are driven only by money, trouble ensues at some point, you know, because it's not a healthy way to live. And it's really great when you actually meet people, when you end up working with people that share the mentality of appreciation, of gratitude. Wow, I mean, we've got something pretty special here. Not many people can say the same. And obviously the grass is always greener, you know, that's that saying, you know, because people can always say, oh, but I wish I was playing arenas all over the world and not doing this, or whatever it might be the case. But we tend to forget the perspective that very few people get to do at the level that you do, that Epica does, you know, for a living, and stay I'm missing the word now, stay relevant on the scenario, stay relevant to people, and keep growing and keep getting like bigger and better opportunities, because that's kind of like what it has been on Epica's career, isn't it? Like if you look back like last year and what this year has been for the band, I mean, it's pretty remarkable, the opportunities and the things that happen, that are happening. And that goes obviously that, you know, finances, they will end up getting better whenever those opportunities and things are big enough, but you're not driven by that. And I think it's absolutely fundamental, especially in the world of ours, that we live in a world where, you know, people still, I mean, are completely taken by the mind and by the actual experience of being this creature called human beings, and we're so archaic, still believing that, you know, invading countries is the thing, and like killing neighbors, and like it really puzzles me how stupid we really are. So it's really refreshing to actually hear what you just said, and with that in mind, how do you see this industry, which is it's very niche when you think about it, heavy metal, and it's something that in the foreseeable future, sometimes it makes me a little bit like, what is it going to happen? Where is this going to? Like, what kind of, I mean, I used to have a band myself. I graduated as a classical singer myself. I studied music and, you know, recorded albums. I was signed at, you know, very early on. I was doing a lot of things that I really thought that's what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. But back
I
then,
know, man.
yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, heavy metal singer, and yeah, did like 4 albums and recorded and toured, and, you know, did a bunch of stuff that I definitely thought this is my path. You know, started back, you know, in early 2000s with Angra, which is a Brazilian band, good friends of mine, and working with them and same producers and sharing the stage and touring together and a bunch of things. But back then, you would still sign a contract, say in Japan, and license a record, even though it's your first album, but the label would say, yeah, we're going to sell 3,000 CDs. So we can actually give you an advance of $3,000 kind of thing. But nowadays, I mean, when I think about, like, what can a newcomer do? Like, the scene has changed so much, and it has been changing so much. Even in London, which is where I live, been living for the last 15 years. When I moved to London, there were places that I could go and play. There was a scene. Nowadays, all of those places are gone. They don't exist anymore. And what do you see, like, for example, as a teacher, you know, as someone that is so involved with, you know, in this world, and it's been your life for such a long time, so you probably see a lot of, like you said, bands coming to you, asking for advice.
Yeah.
What do we do? How do we get on? How do we get exposure? How do we do this? How do we do that? What do you have? What are your views and your honestly, what would you say to somebody coming asking for advice to you? You know, like in a genuine way, not just like, yeah, go practice your instrument, write some good music, and but like, what comes up to you?
Build your network. I think looking back, not only on my path, but also on people that I've met, people I've talked to about how they got where they got, is a lot of it has to do with your network. And then it's as simple as you can have a band and you can practice every weekend and you can get maybe a local gig or whatnot. But to expand and to go for the next step means that if you have your local gig, you might want to go and talk to the owner of the venue. You might want to go talk to other bands, even if it's a band that plays before you, you know. They might be bigger by next year, so... And it's all these little things, you know, like how you build the network is be interested, you know, like ask someone, what are you doing? Maybe besides the band, they might be, I don't know, someone who builds websites, might be someone who's printing stuff, whatever, you know. You never know what people are doing, and that's how you can slowly start building your network. Even if you can't use them now, you'll still know them in 5 years when you might need them. And I think that is as important as the music, as important as whatever has to do with the actual band. And that's, in our case, I would say it's still the case that I'm networking from time to time. But it's also the good thing about having a manager. Now, I'm not saying that every band, starting band, should have a manager. That's totally not what I'm saying, because you should be your own manager at some point, which we did for like 15 years until it was like impossible to tour at the other side of the world while advancing another tour, with a different time zone or being busy all the time. So at some point we got a manager, and that's, I would say, also for him, his main job is networking, making sure that people hear about us, and making sure that he shows his face, that he knows who is going to be in town for this or that tour, or, and I think slowly, if you do that, you'll have a big network of people that every now and then, if you check in on them, they will remember you whenever they need you, or the other way around. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Because I once heard that it only takes, let's say, 3 people to reach every person in the world. That's something like, let's say your average followers on social media would be, let's say, 1,000 people. If you're in a band, let's say, because then you have your family, obviously, but you have people who like the band. You have 1,000 people. So each of this 1,000 people might have another 1,000 people, and then it spreads out. So that's something I've never calculated it, but apparently it only takes 3 persons down the line to reach anyone in the world. Obviously, that might be a little exaggerated, but, I know this guy who knows another guy. That's been said a lot of times in the business, and I guess in any business. And so, yeah, of course, you need to work hard. You need to put in the hours and the work, and the music has to be decent, but there's always these complaints about a lot of people like, oh, this band is not even that great, so how can they be so big? I don't get it. Well, probably they have the right network, and they talk to the right people, or they know the right people, or something like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe on the and again, I think it goes back to the beginning of the conversation when I said that it also has to be something genuine, right? Because in this business of ours, if there's people, I mean, people talk, and then you end up knowing who's for real and who's not for real. And I guess it's the same on every field of work, on any field of business in the world. Some are a bit more reluctant on facing reality sometimes, but in our line of work, it's really word of mouth. Like I always say to people, like the job that I personally do, I can't go on a website, let me apply to be the tour manager for Beyonce.
Exactly. Well, especially in your department, being crew, I would say it's even more important. Well, crew, I don't want to downplay your role, but
no, absolutely,
I mean,
it's crew.
Working for a band, I think the network is even more important, because you never know when your band's going to be off the road because they're going to write a new album, and what you're going to do in the meantime.
Exactly.
If you never said hi to anyone, But
exactly.
it works the other way around as well. It works within the band. And, actually, recently we had a big band meeting, and then next year we're supposed to have the summer off. We're in the middle of a very busy summer. And so I actually suggested that whoever wants to, because I understand that networking is not for everyone. Some people don't like the small talk or whatever, or just don't, it's a familiar face, but where do I know him from, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you do like it, I suggested that maybe if we're not playing the festivals, maybe we can just go there and just talk to people, show our faces. And so it's gonna cost us money if we want to go there, but it's something that eventually might have some return. So I don't see empty agenda necessarily as that you can't do anything.
Absolutely.
Because by that time, we're supposed to write a new album right now. We're going to record it, then by next summer we should be done with the recording. So I could easily say I'll just sit at home and do nothing, which is an option, but probably I won't be doing nothing if I'm sitting at home, because that doesn't exist if you have a family. But either way, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And or I could just still go out there and go to Grasspop for a whole weekend and say hi to all the bands and all the people I know. Absolutely. And ask them how they are, which is something I don't mind doing because I like to know the answer. And it's sometimes as simple as that. So that's like an advice that if you want to skip like you said, get well at your instruments, make sure that your band clicks, that your band members are, that you have a decent drummer, decent guitar player. If you want to skip all of those things that we kind of take for granted, let's say, then I would say networking is very important.
For you, Isaac, having a family and being a touring musician and being as busy as you have been during this year, what are the difficulties that you find to obviously maintain a family and also be a present dad and be a present husband? What are the things that you, for example, see and perhaps even share your knowledge with someone like myself that doesn't have a family but intends one day of having one?
Don't.
I love it.
Well, it's a big challenge, but I like it. It's like how can I say, being on the road as opposed to being at home, it's like two different worlds. At home, I don't have time for breakfast, or I don't take the time. On the road, you wake up in your hotel room, you go downstairs, breakfast is served, and you'd gladly wake up 1 hour earlier to enjoy it. So there's a lot of things that you do on tour that you would never do at home, or the other way around. I do like that. How would I say, duality, that it's like a different life almost. And the only times it gets really troubling, I would say, is if you have too much of one of those. Too much time at home without a real purpose with the band. Let's say you're off the road, the album is done, whatever, you're just at home and you don't have anything to do. Well, that's good for a month, maybe 2 months, but like during the pandemic or the lockdown, it just took way too long. So I guess it's not only in the music business, but if it's too long of the same thing, it gets boring, or you can't appreciate it anymore, or whatever. You just want to go out on the road and do something. Or do something else with the band, like writing or whatever. And then if you're on the road too much, like this year was kind of on the limit, let's say, on the edge, then you just want to be home, and you just want to mow the grass and just forget about shows, or especially now this summer season, it's like my suitcase never leaves the spot I put it in when I get home. Usually it ends up on the attic, but in between tours. But now there's no time for that. You just unpack it, wash the stuff, pack it again, and you're on the road again. So after a couple of months of that, during summer festivals, you want to have a break, which I will have, so we're always trying to maintain that a sort of sane schedule. but sometimes you don't anticipate on it. You're like, oh, we have a tour opportunity there, and then after that we go straight into that other tour, and then in between we're gonna record an EP, and then we're off to summer festival, and then blah blah blah. But all these options get presented in a meeting in January, then one in March, then one in, So you always say, oh yeah, fine, no problem, not realizing that you said yes to all the other options before. So you end up in a situation where you're like, when the hell did I say yes to all of this? and then it's time for a little break, which in this case is coming because we're focusing on the new album, and we only gonna do a handful of shows after summer, and then we have some writing camps lined up. So it's pretty much we rent a house in Holland. We all get together there. We take our laptops and our home studios, some remote things that we can use to write or to go over ideas. We set up in different rooms, so I could walk into the bass player's room and say, hey, what are you working on? So it's a very relaxed environment. And that's 3 of those sessions are coming up later this year. And that's about it. So I'll have a lot of time at home and a lot of catching up. But, truthfully, it's sometimes a challenge to combine it. Especially my wife, she's also working irregular hours, so it's not a 9 to 5. And having a kid, we rely on grandparents quite a lot during busy summer festival seasons. But they love it, so it all works out fine. But it's some managing on that level, like time management. But that's fine.
When you're off road and not recording, you said that you teach. You have a music school, right?
I used. Yeah, the online.
The online thing. Yeah.
I used to teach in person, but I quit that years ago because it was kind of too. Like, if you're on the road, you can't teach, and then if you're back home, you can pick up on it. So it was, for me, it was convenient, but for the student, it's like, oh, well, I don't have a teacher for 2 months now, so what do I do? So eventually, I just quit that. But I did start that online thing.
Is that still active?
Because it's still active, but not as active as I wanted it to be. I guess the whole lockdown COVID thing kind of stopped that, because the idea, it's called College of Metal, and the idea is that the teacher is the person who either wrote the songs or who performs the songs. So in my case, I'm the teacher of only Epica songs, because I either wrote them or I played them and I recorded them, So the best person in the world to explain the songs of Epica would be someone who is playing the songs and recording them in Epica, and that's the concept. So I did those lessons for Epica, and then I had a whole bunch of people from different bands lined up to do that. But then that would happen when the lockdown started, so the recordings couldn't continue. And honestly, after that, also becoming a dad and the band's picking up again, it kind of was pushed back on the shelf. But it's still something I want to continue doing, because a lot of people ask me about it. It seems to be
it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, because you get a lot of courses where someone will explain to you how to play Sad But True by Metallica. But if Kirk Hammett or James Hetfield would tell you, that's a different thing. Or they can say, hey, this is how we recorded it, but now live we play it like this, or I play it like this because it's more convenient. It took me forever to find out, but, these little tips and or I started with this idea and then I changed it into what it eventually became, or that's something that no one else could teach you.
Sure. Yeah.
Also, the personal relationship, even if it's an online lesson, but it's the actual person explaining it to you. You get to know this person just a little better.
Yeah.
And that small bit of information might give you a lot more information about where they come from, why they do what they do, stuff like that. You know? So I thought that would be an interesting concept. Plus, it's also a way of, you know, for musicians to earn more money.
Of course.
The whole idea was to not only help people to learn how to play the songs, but also help, you know, not that some of those people need financial help, but just like, okay, you've done all the work, you've recorded it, you play it. If you teach people how to play it, you also get paid for that. So that helps. And,
are you completely changed of subject now, being mindful of your time, Isaac, and heading to my final questions, the roller coaster questions? I would start asking you if you are spiritual at all, if you have any beliefs.
Yes and no. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm baptized. On paper, I'm a Christian. And I would say that I do think that Christian values are sort of universal values, you know, love your neighbor and stuff like that, and don't kill anyone. So I do believe in those, universal truths, if you want. And there's I don't know if you ever heard of Jordan Peterson.
Of course.
He's a clinical psychologist, and I've read a couple of his books, and I've also seen his series on YouTube about, I think it were biblical lectures, where he explains, like, how did we come to a point where someone wrote down all the stuff that's in the Bible and why it's still relevant thousands of years later. And he tries to not only explain what's written, but also explain how we came to that point where certain stories are so big and still relevant. And I think that was really interesting, and I like the way he answers a question like you just asked. He would say that he acts as if God would exist. So he's not answering yes or no on the question, do you believe in God? It's more like, well, I act it out as if he would exist. And I do like that interpretation. And maybe it's a little coward answer. I don't know. Like, you don't say yes, you don't say no, but you'll never know. So I would say that that's similar to how I want to look at it, you know. And not to say that I act it out all the time. I might be a total asshole from time to time, but I try not to. And spiritual, I like my wife, she's quite spiritual, and I never laugh at her whenever she comes back with a story or a belief or anything like that. I try to be open-minded for it. I think anyone who has read Epica lyrics also knows that we have quite some spirituality in there, and I do believe there's a good portion of those lyrics where I can relate with. But again, it's not something I'm actively searching for. It's not like I'm reading a lot of books about it, or that I'm online searching for spiritual help or anything like that. I used to be really interested in psychology. I read a lot of psychological things, which might be to some degree related to spirituality. So I think we're interesting creatures, and that the world is really interesting, and how we navigate into all of that is something that I sometimes like to think about. Like, how did we get to this point, and what's, like you say, if it's in writing a song or if it's in your career or whatnot, like what's the next direction to take? There's so many options, and what's the best way to go? And that's when stuff like that comes to mind, and where I try to come up with what's the best for me or for the environment or whatever. That's a very vague answer.
No, it's a good answer, very broad answer actually, touching various angles and bringing Jordan Peterson to the conversation. I'm a big fan. I've read all his books really. Like just recently went through Beyond Order, Maps of Meaning is just great, and he's got the his podcast, and on the beginning of the podcast, I think it was 2019, you can find all the biblical series, and it's fascinating. I mean, from time to time I go back, because he's such an eloquent, intelligent man that you really have to take your time to digest what he's saying, because it's so incredible how he managed with words to explain things and give perspectives and different angles from you, that somehow it makes a lot of sense to you, but you never really thought through from that particular angle. So exactly. I really admire him. Yeah, he's definitely,
and that's what I like. Yeah, a lot of people are very short-sighted, like, oh, it's like this. And I love how he, I always try to do the same, like to think about all the nuances and look at it from a different side. But he goes beyond, he's just like, he's taking all. I love how it takes him, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes before even starting to write. To read the first sentence of the Bible. Here's some prequel to to the first sentence of the Bible. Love.
Incredible. Some people just have this mental power. He's definitely one of those. He's a force of nature, that man. And I'm glad that, because he's gone through like a lot of health problems, and now he seems to be back on his feet. So long live Jordan Peterson.
Exactly.
Isaac, do you have or follow any morning routines?
I wake up. Usually. No, well, I would say coffee is like the first thing I need. And well, with a kid around, it's kind of whatever he wants. So it kind of changed. My routine back before we had a kid was different, but now it's a matter of trying to put on some clothes. It's a very big challenge. And after that's done, I might be able to shower myself and to put on my clothes, And by that time, it might be noon already. So, but either way, that we have a lot of animals at home. So in the morning, it's more about them. We have some ponies and cats and chicken and dog.
Really?
So, that's awesome. So I need to make sure they don't die. They have to get some food. And so usually the mornings are quite busy with all of that. And then I usually start working in the afternoon, pretty much.
Very cool, very cool. Isaac, my friend, it's been a pleasure talking to you, man.
Totally.
And I love the fact that, the podcast gives this opportunity to actually, get to know people more. I've had like friends on this podcast that we've spent like 2 hours talking uninterrupted, and I've learned from like that 2 hour more than I've had during the last 6 years of life,
It's crazy. We like a couple of years ago with Epica, we started this Patreon thing, It was the same thing. We've been around 24/7 in tour buses all over the world, and then suddenly you get like a platform where anyone can do, anyone from the band, let's say, whatever they want. And I had exactly the same, like, oh shit, this person is also doing that, or you know. So I know what you mean.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate the music that you do. Thanks for your time. And yeah, I hope to see you soon down the road.
Yeah, definitely. At some point, we'll see each other again.
For sure.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you. Boom! We did it!
Woo.
Fantastic!
Now fuck off.
No, fuck off. Get out of my face. Isaac, brother, thanks a lot, man. I will be editing, and I'm not sure, I think later this week or maybe early next week, that's when it's going to be released. I'll send you the link for it. It's going to be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of that. Thanks again, and yeah.
You're happy with what we just did?
I'm very happy. I'm very happy. I mean, it was very easy because you kind of like naturally navigate the subjects and bring things to the table in a calm, clear, nice way about all of the subjects that we touched, and even brought Jordan Peterson to the end. Now I just thought that we could start another podcast now just talking about, you know, his ideas and things, you know.
Because I thought of him earlier in the conversation, but I thought, well, if I bring this up, we might go like a whole different.
I love it. I love it.
If you start about spirituality, I have to, I have to bring it to the table.
Yeah, totally, 100%. I mean, I'm very into like Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you're into podcasts or anything like that.
Not all of it, but I've heard some of it.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, like guys like Lex Friedman, Tim Ferriss, and there's
Ferriss.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss is a really, really intelligent guy as well. Like talks about business and all sorts of things, you know.
Have you read his book, The 4-Hour Work Week?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It's just
yeah, cool.
It's a great book. It's a great book. I mean, it's an awesome. It's just like, I mean, you could try and implement all the ideas, but I mean, it's you know, I'm not sure if that's exactly like doable for the.
After reading that one, it is the reason College of Metal started is because of that book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I thought, you know, it. Like I said, it's like I did the stuff for Epica, but I'm not going to do the stuff for, let's say, Within Temptation or whichever band, you know. Mm-hmm. I might, you know, have to work for it to put it online and to make sure they get paid, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But actual work is for someone else, and they will get paid for it, so that's fine, I guess. Mm-hmm. And it's a network that's going to, hopefully, if I ever put in the work again, it's going to grow, you know. If a Within Temptation fan finds out about the lessons and there's Epica as well, you know, it's going to slowly grow while sleeping, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's the concept.
And it's something that's like anything, you kind of have to put time and effort into it to grow, isn't it? It's difficult. Yeah. For me, it's the same like with the podcast. It was like, I mean, growing, and then I go on tour. I mean, I mean, literally, like if you like doing like 5 shows a week for like 2 months, when are you gonna do like that? When are you gonna give the attention to it? You know, and if it's really dependable on you, if you can't delegate a particular venture of yours, I mean, then that thing will stay on the sideways for a minute, you know, and then you kind of have to pick it up from. But then again, I think I always say a lot of people start projects and then they expect something very quickly out of it instead of just keep going. Same kind of approach that you said about like talking to the band that is playing before you, because or the person or whatever, because you never know what they're going to be in a year's time or 2 years time, you know. And actually, as a matter of fact, we should just have an approach in life in general to everyone like that, because we are essentially, that's what I believe, essentially the same thing. We are pure consciousness, and the only thing that differentiates us is the fact that we have 5 senses, so we have perceptions, and we interact with the world, with reality in different ways. Therefore, I look at you, and you are this person, you know, and I am this person. And then we both have a mind, so we are attached to ideas. I am this, my family, my things, my career, my I. And throughout millions of years of evolution of of us as a biological thing that we call Homo sapiens, eventually 200,000 years ago, we just evolved to a point that we completely forgot of who we truly are. We just are brought to the world, and then we open our eyes, we hear, we smell, we taste, we see, and we start interacting with the world, a world that is already built in the way that it is. The systems, the schools, the society, the presidents, and this and that, and you're just like another one out there. And then you are, you know, navigating this existence and trying to make things anyway. All of that to come to the very basic understanding that if you just stop the mind, if you just quieten the mind, if you just literally just be with your own self and go to that place that never really changes, which is the real you, pure consciousness. There's no smell, there's no name, there's no career, there's absolutely nothing. It's pure stillness. That's who we truly are. As soon as you open your eyes and you identify with the external world, with perceptions and things, that's when we get lost. So what am I saying? Should I go up to a mountain now and meditate for the rest of my life? Not saying that. But it's good to actually have a little bit of an understanding, because then we go back to, you know, what, say, Jesus said, or Buddha, or whatever, you know, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Respect people regardless if it's the president of the United States or if it's the guy collecting my rubbish downstairs. You know, because we are the same. What the difference that we put into it is a perception from our mind. And obviously the world that we live in is full of that. We obviously, it's just natural of the human being nowadays to do that. But having this understanding makes us maybe, hopefully, a little bit humbler and a little bit better as individuals. And if you're a little bit better as an individual, you're going to be a little bit better to your family, to your friends, and then those things, they tend to spread, you know. And whatever happens within the next 100 years, if we're still going to be around here, who knows, you know, maybe we're going to have made a difference. And yeah, now I went deep down into the
we do need another podcast.
Yeah. That could have been another podcast.
Forget about all the music. Because, you know, I also mentioned the challenges, right? And I think like referring to, again, the Bible or whatever, or Jesus, like the 40 days in the desert, to me is like the or if you're fasting or whatever, it's 40 days, it's 6 weeks. I used to do like 6 weeks, 6-pack challenges. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. It was like 6 weeks of 6 days a week working out. Then one muscle day, one cardio day, blah, 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 you know, and then one combined 6-day, like very intense. And it's manageable. It's 6 weeks. It's not like 1 year, you know, so I do like that. So whenever I challenge myself to learn something new or do something, I kind of give myself 6 weeks. And yeah, so, I mean, not sure why I'm saying this now, but it's like,
I think
if you break it down into little chunks, it's not like it's so overwhelming. Yeah,
I think six weeks is what it takes for you to adapt to a new habit, you know, because people tend to kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna get into this diet, I'm gonna change everything, I need to change my life, and then you're very motivated for like a few days for the first week, maybe the second week, on the third, something might have happened that made you feel better already, so you kind of like not put too much attention to that anymore, and all of a sudden you fall back into you know, your old habits. And as creatures, we are lazy by nature. We want to be lazy. You don't want to, it's, you know, our brains come on the way before than our bodies will let go. When it comes to exercising, for example, you know, I mean, it's always the mind. It's not that you don't have the time, but you empower that thought, because it's comforting for you to say, I don't have the time today, I'm going to skip the gym today. Or I've worked too hard today, so I deserve to just, you know, have pizza and beer tonight and chocolate or whatever. You know, we empower those thoughts without knowing it. Without knowing it, because you can be aware of your thoughts and understand that, listen, I'm not feeling it today. I'm not going to go for a run because, yeah, I mean, I've been really busy. No, hang on a minute. I've been busy, but I do have half an hour. I could go for a little jog, but I don't want to. And I really want to be cheeky and just have like a cheat meal too. Okay, great. I'm observing all that. I know that I'm lying to myself, and I will accept that. That's okay. That's okay then, as long as you know that you don't keep doing the same thing forever, because it's not good for you. But nobody teaches us that, unfortunately. You know, I mean, for me, one of the things that really changed is the habit of meditation. I've been meditating for years now, for like 6 years. It's something that I do on a daily basis, no matter what. I always say I have non-negotiables, you know. And
so that's what you do first thing in the morning, or
first thing in the morning. First thing in the morning, yeah. I empty stomach, you know. Sometimes I actually brew coffee first. I go outside, I look to the skies. I get like clarity, be that sunshine or just the clarity of the day, to regulate your circadian rhythm, which is really important. First thing, like on the first hour of the day, to get exposed to the sunshine, to clarity, but actually look up, not like clarity just on this level, but like literally like towards the sun. And if it's too strong, you just, you know, you get those rays coming. In the same way that it would be important for you to be outside when the sun is setting, you know, so your organism gets regulated by that. Obviously on tour and playing shows, you never get to do that, because that's the time when you're going to be on stage, etc. But that's okay, that's fine, as long as when you go back home and you find yourself in a more of a normal type of schedule, where you're going to go to bed at reasonable hours, wake up, you know, somewhat early. They implement those things, because those things dictate a lot of your biology, of your personal health, and that as a consequence, how your brain works, how your organism works, how you're going to age, you know. And I always say I have non-negotiables that I do it on my life regardless, which is meditation, regular exercise, strength and cardio and all that, and tackling my diet. You know, like if those three things are pillars that they when you think through as a human creature, what else is more important than that? Than actually, you know, keeping your body active and strong and healthy, looking after whatever is happening inside of your head, paying attention to that, because our minds play tricks against us, and in various ways. And also what you put inside of your mouth. You know, what as a human being, what is it more important than that? Because if you don't address those things, then how can you be really good to a friend, to a colleague, to a family member? You know, so in a way, people say, "Oh, but you're selfish when you just take." No, we all should be selfish to a certain extent. Because if you're not really great towards yourself, then how can you be great to someone else? You know.
Yeah.
The other thing I was saying to a friend of mine just the other day, and I've heard from Jordan Peterson. It's like he says, people always ask the question, how can I find the perfect partner, the perfect boyfriend, girlfriend, eventually get married? That's the wrong question. The question should be, how can I be the absolute most desirable, best partner? Because when you address that and you actually try to be the best version of yourself, you might end up connecting and attracting someone on the same league as yours, you know, and then you might get into something special, something good, you know. So anyway, yeah, non-negotiables. I always have that, non-negotiables.
So I guess in your case, there's gonna be a bombshell waiting for you.
It has always been like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has always been like that. But the thing is, the way that I like live my life, I know that, I mean, unless if something extraordinarily happened, but I mean, I've inherited good health from family, and I really look after myself. I mean, I'm gonna live pretty well, and I hope that I've got a few years to kind of like get myself into that position of like, there's obviously you are always striving to get better, but I think there's always a time and place for things, you know. And I've lived a very interesting life in many ways, you know, from like being a musician, working on family businesses, moving and living in different parts of the world, and eventually diving into the music business, and then the path that I'm following now, the people that I know, the friends that I have, and all of that puts me in a position where I've always been interested in exploring. I'm a Sagittarius, so never really interested in having one relationship, if you know what I mean, you know. Never hurting anyone, or at least as far as I know, but always, you know, exploring, learning more about those things. And as funny as it sounds, I'm actually seeing someone now, and she's a beautiful, beautiful blonde. So who knows where that might lead to?
I know where it leads to. Super nights and a lot of work. Good luck.
Thank you. Very encouraging.
But hey, it's worth it. That's what they all gonna say. Hey, it's worth it. Sometimes I wake up, I'm like, huh, am I supposed to say it's worth it now?
I love it. I love it.
It's like knocking on my shoulder at 5 a.m. Daddy, I'm awake. It's totally worth it.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, you know, it's just like I guess we all want to like we it's very difficult to comprehend and be able to detach. We all want to be appreciated. We want to be liked, and we have physiological needs and things like that. I personally understand all that, but I also work on myself to the matter of the fact that I gotta be happy on my own, because if you're not happy on your own, you know, you're in bad company. You know what I mean? And most people, they need to be around people all the time. If they're not doing, they need to be out. They need to be doing this. I don't need that. I like being on my own. I like being in solitude. You know, with myself. You know, and I know that people have different approaches for those things, but it gets also to a point that, you know, we mature. You know, and it gets to a point that you start thinking about, well, but maybe it would be nice to have someone. If that's going to lead to something really serious like marriage and kids and a family, it's another story. But if you don't give a chance to that, then you'll never know.
Yeah, true.
You know, so so yeah.
And I guess you've also heard what Jordan says about that. You know, like he's totally like, well, if you thought having a family and being married and having kids is going to be one big happy family, you're totally wrong, right?
Yeah.
But that in itself is the lesson or the challenge, or, you know. So I totally agree with that.
It's work. It's work. It's absolute work. You know, and you gotta be willing to put in the work. Like anything else that you do, you know, you gotta feed, you gotta, you know, water the plants every day, even when you're like in good mood and things like that. And I think it takes some people, like my sister, she's 9 years younger than me, and she's got a beautiful family, she's got a kid, she's got her life way more sorted than I do, you know. But then again, I wouldn't change anything for her life, and I'm pretty sure that she wouldn't change, you know. So everyone is different, and for some reasons that we can't comprehend. I fully believe that we tend to think that we know it all, but we have 5 senses, and everything that we have ever known, every story that we have ever read, every scientific proof that came, and every theory, it always came from the same place that you and me inhabit, the human mind, and based on the very same five senses that both of us have. Nobody ever brought something from space that nobody understands. No. And then we are so petulant to believe that we know it all based on five senses. But is that really all that exists? Because, I mean, you know, fishes and the sea and currents and energy out there, I mean, I'm pretty sure that they are not connected to the same things that me and you are, you know,
Yeah.
and I don't see a lot of discrepancy in nature in the same way that humans have, and things like that. So there is something, whatever that is, you know, energy out there that we do not control, we have no control over, but the more we try at least to express positiveness and gratitude and try a little bit to be in touch with that, I think we become a little bit more in control of ourselves and our future and our surroundings, you know. It's like Carl Jung says, people that don't have a plan, that don't have a plan, you know, they have a plan, but it's a plan that they haven't chosen, because everything will keep happening to them and they will call it fate.
Yeah.
Because subconsciously you are desiring things, you are dreaming about that holiday or that car or that house or whatever. But if you don't address those things, I mean, life will keep, like, you know, and sometimes it's really hard because you just,
even if you have a plan, it's still gonna do that.
absolutely, 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 100%, absolutely, 100%. And the craziness of this world is that we have to keep striving because we need money to survive, to pay the bills, to do this and do that. So it's very difficult to just try to be good and also, like, connect to reality and mingle with humans and all of that. So it's, yeah, it's a thing.
Can't wait to sit in heaven with 77 virgins, man, for eternity, and don't have to go through all of this.
Exactly. But in the meantime, let's bloody enjoy this ride of ours, you know.
And heaven will say, but it was worth it.
But it was worth it, yeah. Isaac, my friend, take care, man. Have a good week, good rest of summer with the shows, and I'll speak to you soon. Say hello to everyone in the band for me.
I will. Take care, and see you soon, hopefully.
See you soon.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye, Isaac. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, man. Ah, fucked up. Fucked up. Ah. Que merda mesmo. que merda, né? Não gravei.